On today's show, we have part 2 of my top 30 Rangers prospect rankings, including talking about some young outfield bats with some prodigious power potential. All that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the Texas Rangers, the first and best daily Rangers podcast. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan, covering this team for 11 seasons, including all 6 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank you all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. Now, before we get into my next 6 Rangers prospects on this top 30. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now, on yesterday's show, I talked about this system kind of as a whole, talked about my first 6 prospects in the top 30. Now we're doing prospects number 19 through 24 on today's show. And as we saw in yesterday's episode, this farm isn't quite as deep as it's been in years past. Really felt like I was, clawing for guys who I would normally not include in a top 30, including a lot of relievers, guys who were just going to be relievers. That's all they are. There's nothing wrong with relievers. It's just in terms of prospect value and the excitement and overall future potential, usually relievers aren't that. Usually if you start off as a reliever, you can only go down from there. But in this episode, we have no primary relievers. One who might end up as a reliever. But we're talking about bats. We got 5 out of these 6 players on today's show are bats. Now let's start with the number 24 prospect in my top 30 rankings. We have number 24, Yeremi Cabrera, a 19-year-old outfielder who has been absolutely raking the last couple of years. A left-handed batter signed out of the Dominican Republic. He doesn't turn 20 until July 2nd of next year. I'm just looking that he was born in 2005 and feeling myself crumple into dust at my computer. Listed at 5'11", 155 pounds. He's a little bit bigger than that now, thankfully, but the power from a guy who is, again, listed a little bit bigger in actuality at 155 pounds is not what you'd expect. Last year, another great power hitting season, spent time between the Arizona Complex League and Down East in his age 18 season. 72 games combined between those two levels, 9 home runs, 4 triples, 14 doubles, and 858 OPS on the season as a whole. Really, really good numbers, but you look into it and the numbers are much, much better at the Arizona Complex League. 49 games there versus 23 in Down East. Still young for the level in the Complex League at 18, nearly 2 years younger than the average player in that league. A 1,000 OPS, a 300, 438, 571 slash line, including all 9 of his home runs were in the Arizona Complex League. Then gets promoted to full season ball a little later on in the season. 23 games there. No home runs, just 1 triple, 3 doubles, a slash line of 185, 298, 247, a 545 OPS. Much lower, but still, the fact that the Rangers felt comfortable enough to send him all the way up to full season ball is very impressive. Because he was born on July 2nd, he was able to sign at a young age, play his age 16 season, even though he was technically 17. He was 17 when he was playing his first year of pro ball. That was in the Dominican Summer League. Spent the next year in the Dominican Summer League as well. Last year, 2023, or I guess now it's 2 years ago. 46 games there, a little over 200 plate appearances. Had 7 home runs as a 17-year-old. That does not happen. You look at the slash line there, still another 3-4-5 season, hitting over 300, on base over 400. On base was actually 445 more walks than home runs, another sign that you love to see. And the OPS north of 1,000, that is very impressive from a youngster showing this kind of power potential. He's played all three spots in the outfield: center field, left field, right field. Most of his games have been in center field, but he's split time a little bit more between the corners. I mean, the most games at one position he's played has been in center field so far in his career. That is, I believe, 59 games in center field, 31 in left, 57 in right. He's got great power speed potential as well. I mean, already showing this kind of power in game is rare. Last year in those 72 games, he had 24 stolen bases. So again, the speed is also playing on the base paths. His instincts in the outfield are a little raw, but I think he can stick in center field. He was an absolute bargain signing in that 2022 class, signing for only $10,000. He and Echedri Vargas were both real absolute bargains in that. Vargas no longer in the Rangers system, sent to Miami in that Jake Burger trade, but he's still here. But this young Yeremi Cabrera putting up some incredible numbers so far, showing up in such a big way at such a young age, at such a level, is very impressive. A lot of this, you can look at these two different ways, whether it's, you look at the numbers and evaluate based on that, or if you happen to be out there in the complex league or in Carolina and are watching him and kind of get more of an eye on that, or you can kind of look at the where the Rangers are placing these players. That's also a big factor in these rankings of how much confidence do the Rangers have in a young player to challenge them, to send them to a higher level, to let them struggle at that higher level and know that it's not going to break them, but instead make them even better. And oh, by the way, speaking of those steal numbers, 7 for 7 in stolen base attempts at Down East. So a perfect 7 for 7 at the higher level, which pretty impressive for this kid. Again, he's still very young. It was only 23 games in full season ball. He did get eaten up a little bit, but the fact that he was able to hit lefties well as a lefty, a 791 OPS against lefties as a left-handed hitter, that's an impressive sign as well. He hit righties very well at 876 OPS in 239 plate appearances against right-handed pitching. Solid stuff for him. Loved what I saw from him. Loved the reports that I'm hearing from him about his legit power potential. There's still going to be some swing and miss to his game because you sacrifice that much for an upper, pull happy, homer happy kind of stroke, but it's working. It's getting good results, and he's got a decent approach to the plate. I mean, having a 398 on base percentage as such a youngster, it's impressive. And having that speed to go along with it, this is a guy who's got a decent ceiling. We'll see how he really looks in full season ball next year. I would assume he still goes back to Down East to start the year. But overall, really impressive first little stint of full season ball, stateside ball from Yeremi Cabrera, the Rangers' number 24 prospect. Next guy on this list is someone who I've talked about quite a bit, Abimelec Ortiz, listed as a first baseman / outfielder. I think that his outfield hopes are kind of done. He did play 18 games in right field this year. It was a tale of two halves with him, two halves of the season. Abimelec Ortiz is a guy with prodigious power potential, was a undrafted signee in that 2020 class. There were quite a few of those guys like Josh Stephen, but him out of Puerto Rico. He is turning 23 in February of next year. He went to high school at the Carlos Beltran Baseball Academy in Florida, Puerto Rico, which is just a little confusing of of those two things. Like, is it in Florida? Is it in Puerto Rico? But last year, as a whole, spent the whole season in Frisco and did okay. His overall numbers aren't super impressive, but when you look at the difference between the first and the second half, overall, 115 games, 18 home runs, a 760 OPS. The first half OPS was 556. It was bad. It was really bad. But the thing that confused me the most is this is the guy who I saw the most as the hitter that I evaluated the most last year. I saw him for maybe 10, 12 games last year. A lot of those were in May in the midst of his really rough stretch. And I was just confused because the approach was good. The approach was solid. He didn't look like he was just getting his lunch eaten, but the results would say he was getting destroyed. And then I watched him in the second half, and the approach was the same. It was the same thing, but the results were absolutely incredible. 13 of his 18 home runs came in the second half. In the second half, he had a slash line of 304, 402, 547. That is a 949 OPS, nearly 400 points better, 392 points better OPS in the second half than in the first half. Could see a little bit more power. I mean, not quite the same level of prodigious power he had in his breakout season of 2023 when he had 33 bombs in 109 games during the regular season, then went to surprise, hit 3 more bombs in 12 games there in the Arizona Fall League, had an OPS north of 1,000 in 12 games in the Fall League, exactly 50 plate appearances, a 990 OPS combined between Down East and Hickory in the regular season. This is a guy who's a first base prospect who could have been protected on the 40-man roster in the Rule 5 draft. I thought maybe someone might take a flyer on him, but the Rangers said, hey, it's fine. We won't protect him. They'll be fine. I bet he starts the season in AAA Round Rock. We'll see how he looks there, if he can continue what he did in the second half. Maybe eventually he cracks a spot on this roster as a DH, but I mean, who knows? He's got legit everyday first base kind of potential. Again, if you're going to be a first base prospect, you got to hit, and you got to hit a lot, and you got to hit everybody. Didn't hit lefties particularly well. Struggled a bit in the first half. Defensively, he's fine at first base. Works a decent number of walks and has that elite pop potential. First base is a little bit position blocked for the moment, but hey, you hit like you did in 2023, then maybe this is a guy that the Rangers are looking at as a part of their long-term plans. Come on, we'll look at a few more hitting prospects, including also the one pitching prospect in this list, a guy who isn't going to pitch in 2025, but might factor into the Rangers' starting rotation or maybe their bullpen in 2026 or beyond. All that and more right after this. This show is brought to you by Game Time. You know, I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories last year was watching Kumar Rocker in his home debut, and I got my tickets through Game Time. I got such a great deal, last-minute tickets. It was the lowest price I could possibly find. It was such a fun time watching Rocker out there, and even though the Rangers didn't win that game, and even though Rocker didn't look his best self, still just being there in the building at live events, that's what it's all about. Game Time makes it so easy to get those tickets. They've got great deals on all kinds of different events, whether you're wanting to go to a Rocker start or a DeGrom start next year or a concert or comedy or whatever the heck you're looking at. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Shout out to the Everydayers for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. We'll be back tomorrow doing part 3 of my Rangers top 30 prospect rankings. Now, let's get into the next guy on this list. Number 22, right-handed pitcher Izack Tiger. An incredible name and a pretty darn good pitching prospect that had some real bummer news at the end of this season. He underwent hybrid elbow reconstruction surgery, the modified Tommy John, if you will, and he's going to miss basically all, if not actually all, of 2025. This is a guy who the Rangers picked in the draft coming out of a tiny school, Butler Community College in El Dorado, Kansas, 7th round pick back in 2023, and it looks like a really, really good pick for the Rangers. Pitched a little bit in the Complex League in 2023, just a couple of games there, and then last year started the season on the IL with some elbow inflammation. You thought, oh boy, here it is again, this guy's going to get Tommy John. No, it turns out he didn't. And he pitched a decent chunk this season, 13 games, 12 of those were starts, 46 innings overall from 3 different leagues. Started in the Complex League, dominated there, then went to Down East in Low A, dominated there, then pitched in Hickory and had a couple of bumpy outings, but overall still pretty impressive results. A 2.93 ERA in 46 innings, 59 strikeouts. Did have a little bit of a walk problem, 4.1 walks per 9, including 6.3 in those just over 15 innings at the highest level of Hickory. But he is going to be out for basically all of 2025. Again, only pitched in 46 innings last year, but he's a guy who's got 3 pretty darn good pitches, 3 really good pitches, and one that's serviceable. He used to have a straight changeup or a regular traditional changeup. The Rangers said, nope, we're going to make you throw a splitter. It's going to work really, really well with your other pitches. So a very, very similar kind of repertoire, actually exactly similar in terms of the type of pitches as Alejandro Rosario, and also the same type of pitches as Roki Sasaki. Not quite that level, but the velocity on Izack Tiger, it's up there. It sits in the upper 90s, touches as high, mid to upper 90s, I should say, and touches as high as triple digits. That slider is really, really nasty. The splitter is pretty solid offering. The Rangers might want to add a 4th pitch, maybe a curveball, to kind of give left-handed batters another pitch to think about, because the slider from righties, they usually aren't that good against lefties. The slider, it's got a lot of great movement, but in terms of his ability to land it for strikes and for hitters to respect it, it's still a work in progress there. The fastball has got some good shape. The splitter it works well. It works well. It's not an elite pitch, but it's, I think, potential big league average. Upside, if everything goes really, really well, maybe he's a mid-rotation starter. I think it's much more likely that he ends up in the back of the pen, because that's just kind of the way these things go. Also, he's 23 years old, and he's going to miss an entire season of development. He turns 24 in February of next year, so maybe the Rangers go ahead and speed up that development curve by just throwing him in the bullpen, where he might have ended up anyway. You have those kind of walk issues already at high A, and he's not that young at this point, but still seems like a scouting win. Another guy who they went with under slot in that 2023 draft so that they could have some room to sign Wyatt Langford to that big old deal, which looks like a real smart move by the Texas Rangers in that 2023 draft to make sure, no matter what else we do in that 2023 draft, we got to make sure we got enough room to sign Wyatt Langford, because I can't imagine what it would have been like if the Rangers landed him, but were not able to collect the bonus pool money to go ahead and meet his signing demands. Now let's look at the number 21 prospect in this Rangers system, a guy who fell pretty far, honestly. The number 21 prospect in this list, in this system, is Anthony Gutierrez, a no longer teenage outfielder, a guy who was the Rangers, what they thought their crown jewel in their 2023 class, but just hasn't quite worked out so far. He's still very, very young, but coming off of an injury-plagued season that ended prematurely with shoulder surgery, that's always a concerning sign, especially when the guy hasn't really hit for all that much power as of yet. Just 1 home run last year in 76 games. Just 1. Not great. And then you look at the year before, he was an 18-year-old, spent a lot of time in Down East playing full season ball as an 18-year-old. That was impressive, but only 2 home runs for him that year. And then his age 17 season, his first year of pro ball, he hit 4 home runs in 45 games. So that was his career high, was 4 in the shortest season that he's had. Not exactly ideal. He's a guy who, if you look at in terms of Rangers position player prospects, he might have, I'd say, the second highest ceiling, because Sebastian Walcott's ceiling is incredibly high. But everybody else in this system, Gutierrez still, the Rangers were talking very, very highly about him, even after last year where the power potential didn't really show up, but he held his own. He more than held his own as an 18-year-old at full season ball. This was just a disappointing year for him. He also had wrist injuries that heard him spent some time on the IL with some finger issues. Also spent some time on the developmental list to try and improve that ground ball rate. He was just hitting the ball into the dirt, hitting it decently hard, but mostly just into the dirt, and that's not a great way to hit home runs. That's actually nearly impossible to hit home runs if you hit it into the dirt in the infield. You'd have to have, super flash speed, whatever, to get a home run while hitting a ball in the infield, or just have the worst infield defense that you're playing against in the history of baseball. But either way, not the greatest start to his pro career. And again, that shoulder surgery, you worry about it might sap the power potential for him. But again, he's still so young. He's going to be heading into his age 20 season. I would imagine that he goes back to Hickory. I don't think the Rangers will just straight up promote him to AA, even though he did spend 71 games at Hickory last year. He was still 3 years younger than the average player in the Sally League. Again, still very young, still a lot of way to go, still a lot of upside, but those injuries and the already not showing that much power in game, while it's still there, it's just a little bit concerning for Gutierrez, who at the start of last year was my number 6 Rangers prospect. And that's kind of shows you a little bit of how far he fell off this year, and also hopefully a sign of me just believing that much more in the prospects above him. Coming up, we got 2 more guys on this list, including an outfielder who did make his debut this year, and another younger outfielder with a whole bunch of power potential. Right after this. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 to get $250 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Right now, they got a bunch of Major League Baseball odds, and looking at the American League winner projection, the Rangers, 4th favorite to win the American League at plus 950 behind the likes of the Yankees, Orioles, and Houston Astros. Not sure why the Orioles are so far up there after doing quite literally nothing this offseason, even though they have almost twice as good odds as the Rangers to win the World Series. Orioles at plus 1,200, Rangers at plus 2,300. You can go check out all those odds. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You can start with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make the playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Shout out to the Everydayers for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. We're back with 3 more episodes this week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. That's right, 5 episodes this week, all talking about my top 30 Rangers prospects. Now let's get into number 20 on this list, an outfielder you have seen in the big leagues who has already got his first big league hit and his first big league home run. That's right, it's Dustin Harris. A guy who the Rangers got in a trade with the Oakland A's many moons ago. A guy who the Rangers most definitely got the better end of that deal on in exchange for, Mike Minor. The Rangers also got Marcus Smith, and they sent, I believe, cash considerations with Mike Minor to the Oakland A's back in 2020. Yeah. Not the best trade for the Oakland A's. I don't think the biggest swindle for the Rangers in terms of trades with the Oakland A's. Getting an All-Star and World Series champion catcher in Jonah Heim for Elvis Andrus. That feels like a pretty sweet deal for the Rangers, including a guy who was on my honorable mentions last show to start this one. But let's talk about Dustin Harris, who has made his big league debut, who is no longer a dude. His dude status has been revoked. He is officially a big leaguer for all time. Granted, it was just 2 games. Went 0 in his first big league game, and then the next one, 3 RBIs, a double for his first hit, and then his first big league home run. Impressive stuff for him in game 162. Him and Marc Church both notching some firsts for their major league career on game 162, making that game just a little bit better. But last year, spent most of his season with AAA Round Rock. An on-base percentage in the high 350s at 358. He's a guy who's pretty fast, pretty athletic, could potentially hit the ball really hard, but just does not hit it over the fence enough. That's the main frustration with Dustin Harris. He spent a lot of his career as a first baseman / third baseman. He was fine, not great there. The instincts took a while to get to average in the outfield. He kind of made that switch in about 2022. I was seeing him quite a bit in Frisco. Saw him a little bit in Frisco in 2023. And now he looks fine out there in the outfield. He's really fast, a lot faster than a guy his size you would think would be. He also had 35 stolen bases last year at AAA Round Rock. Did get caught stealing 10 times, but he had 41 stolen bases the season before. So he's a guy who's also had a 2020 minor league season. 20 home runs, a career high for him his first year with Texas in 2021. He also had 25 stolen bases that year, split between Down East and Hickory. Then spent the next full season in Frisco. He had an OPS north of 800. Thought, okay, here we go. A guy who's slugging in the 470s, on base in the 340s. The on base has been there. The strikeouts haven't been bad. He's a left-handed hitter. He's got power potential, but again, he's had power potential for quite some time. He just doesn't quite impact the ball all that much with the regularity you would kind of hope for a guy who is that big. I mean, he's 25 years old. He's not getting much bigger, listed at 6'2", 185 pounds. But, decent player. I think would be a pretty good fourth outfielder. Might spend a decent chunk of time with the Rangers at the big league level this year if there's an injury to, say, Evan Carter or Leo Taveras or Dolis Garcia or, God forbid, Wyatt Langford. I think that Dustin Harris is definitely going to be one of those. Is going to be the first call. In terms of guys who I don't think will start the season on the Rangers big league roster, but are solid bench / complimentary pieces, I think Dustin Harris is up there. Maybe even more so than Jonathan Ornelas, who will be mentioned later on in this list. He's also spent some time in center field. The on-base skills are there. I'd like him to hit the baseball a little bit harder, but overall, if that's your biggest nitpick for a guy, this is a solid player. And I think I maybe have him too low since he's already been at the big leagues and shown consistency at the upper minors of getting on base, hitting for a decent average, get really good on base. And with that kind of speed on the base pass and becoming passable in left field / maybe in center and right. I haven't seen him that much in center and right to make a judgment on that. But still, good athlete, good makeup, just hit the ball maybe a smidge harder, and this is a legit potential everyday big league guy. Probably not for the Rangers unless, things start to happen. The Rangers trade away Adolis Garcia, or they want to play Chuck Peterson less, or they trade away Leo Taveras, or Evan Carter gets hurt. I don't see him carving an everyday role with the Rangers, but I think there's definitely still potential for, big league regular everyday left fielder, and that's a solid thing to say, and I can't say that about a whole bunch of guys that I feel that confident in the rest of this system, even including the next guy I'm about to talk about, whose ceiling, granted, is much higher, and a guy who does not have Dustin Harris' same problem in not hitting the baseball very hard. That's right, the number 19 prospect in the Rangers system is the young outfielder Braylin Morel. He is a right-handed hitter listed at 6'2", 180 pounds. He turns 19 in January, on January 19th. Actually, this is January. So in 2 weeks, basically, he's going to be turning 19 years old. He has had 2 professional seasons so far. First season, 17-year-old in 2023, Dominican Summer League, hit 7 home runs, which I believe led the league that year. He also had 17 doubles and 8 triples, and that was only in 47 games. His OPS was north of 1,000, hit over 340, on base nearly 420, slugged over 640. This is a guy who hits the crap out of the baseball. He's got a decent arm, probably ends up in right field. He's played 1 whole game in center field. I don't expect him to stay there. Doesn't really steal that many bags this year. He did get after it a little bit, though, in the Arizona Complex League. This year's numbers weren't quite as insane as last year, but still very impressive at a younger level, or at a higher level, being younger than 2 years younger than the average player at the complex league, an OPS of 982, 7 home runs yet again, 12 stolen bases, so getting after it a little bit more. I don't know, he's going to keep that speed. He's earned some comps to Marcell Ozuna, who is a very, very good hitter with the Braves. I don't think that he is going to end up as a DH-only type of guy like Ozuna is, but again, kept up that power. 5 triples this year, again, 10 doubles, all in 41 games, under 200 plate appearances. This is a guy who really impacts the baseball, who I am excited to see what he looks like in full season ball. Still maybe a little early to put him in the top 20 Rangers prospects. It's more of a sign of the rest of the system than it is a true indicator of Braylin Morel, but this is a guy who could pretty easily jump into the top 10 next year. If he starts putting up these kind of numbers at full season ball as a teenager, that's when you start to turn your head and say, oh, okay. This is a guy who needs to be looked out for. This is a guy who we need to, pay attention to. He's got 42 walks in 386 career plate appearances, so he is swing missing a decent rate, 93 strikeouts in those nearly 400 plate appearances, so not quite a 25% strikeout rate, but when the walks are at that decent level and you're impacting the baseball, hitting it over the fence, in-game power as a teenager, this kind of in-game power is rare, and if he can keep up that speed, then who knows what the ceiling might be for young outfielder Braylin Morel, the number 19 prospect in my Rangers top 30 prospect list. That's going to do it for today's show. We'll be back tomorrow with the next 6 on this list. Thank y'all so much for listening and subscribing, and until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.